Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Cotunkquit Chronicles, which has been broadcast and developed here in the island of Cotunkquit in our studio. We acknowledge the custodians of the land where we are broadcasting from today, including the Narragansett Nation, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I'm your host, James Allen, and I'm joined here most weeks, and this week by the extraordinary adventurer, extreme sport enthusiast, and all-around great gal, Ashlyn Komoric. Hello and welcome to Cotunkquit Chronicles. We're here today. We have a visitor. Who have you brought with you, Ashlyn?
My friend, Jane Royce.
Oh, Jane Royce. Jane and I are competitors, as it turns out.
Oh, no, we're not going to bring up pickleball again.
We are. Golf, pickleball. And in golf, I recall you had a very low score, Jane.
Well, the lowest I ever got was a 41, and that was only because I was playing with my husband and I was trying to beat him.
So Jane is very competitive.
I do know that.
A little bit.
I think you had me by about 4 or 5 strokes on the day that day. Well, welcome to the Chronicle studio, Cotunkquit here, where, we've experienced something different, except the temperature remains the same in this studio, 92 degrees and muggy. And winter, spring, summer, and fall, I think. I don't know, they haven't figured that out yet, but we talk about that quite often. Ashlyn, do you have any questions for your friend here? I know I have a few.
Well, Jane is very knowledgeable on Cotunkquit history. And so I have this map from, it says Revolutionary map.
Oh.
Or from the Revolutionary War.
Sorry, I wasn't born then, but I can try and help.
I know, but you know some Cotunkquit history. I just want your comment on it. So it's a little hard to see. But
that's the rustling of the paper.
Notice that there's an Indian burial grounds near the Shores Beach. Yeah, I found lots of interesting things about on that little map, which supposedly is, from the 1700s. I did not know that there was a school up on the north end.
Yeah, actually there were 3 schools. One was at the end of what we call now Carlene, and then there was one over as you come around the corner to Mackerel Cove.
So there were three schools for 3 students. Is that correct?
Well, it's pretty close.
Yes.
Well, it was hard for them to travel, so they had one in the north end for the kids who were, children of the farmers, and then they had one near
The Cotunkquit, yeah.
Rat Tail.
Oh, yeah, okay, Rat Tail, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, there really was one out there?
Not that far, no, but it was near the corner as you turn to go to Mackerel Cove.
Oh, okay.
Oh, right where all the motorcycles ride by, right?
Yeah. Well, Cotunkquit never gets rid of a building. They just move it and have another use for it. And they never knew that the building that was near Mackerel Cove was moved over to where they had a library. And the library across from the Episcopal Church turned into a museum. And when they were renovating it, they found a blackboard and realized that this was the building that they used to have down near the corner of Mackerel Cove.
Oh, they moved the building.
Oh, so that museum building that's right there now, it was an old school.
It was an old school that was moved.
Huh.
Yes. And actually, when it was moved, it was turned into a library. And then they changed it into, when the new library was built, they changed it into the museum.
I see.
Yeah, that house moving thing.
It's very popular.
Well, the first house I lived in Cotunkquit came from Rat Tail there was military housing out there.
Yep. There was also a big fishing village, and they took a lot of those small buildings and they put them into what was called Parks Village or like a fishing village up at that area of the island. And then some people made them into larger homes and so on.
Yes, quite large now.
Well,
They're blocking the sun at the moment.
Yes, that is
There used to be
happening
sun in Jane.
all over Katunkwit.
Yes, it is.
Little houses are being turned
Used to be
into
sun around here, Jane.
McMansions.
Yeah. Jane, has it been a long time since you rock and rolled?
Has it been a long time?
Has it been a long time since you rock and rolled?
Well, I might think about that for a while, but I do rock and roll at home when I have my music on and I'm cleaning.
Okay. Follow-up question. Do you frequent the Katunkwit Cafe where all that music takes place downtown?
Well, I have a funny story about that. When I was growing up here, it was a real dive. And one of the bartenders was a man, and I can't make this up, this is true. His name was Mr. Beers. And he was the grandfather of a good friend of mine. And we would walk by as little kids, and he'd say, "Don't let me ever catch you in here." "No, Mr. Beers, we'll never go in there." So I had the fear of God put into me as a child, and I was afraid to go in for a very long time.
So it was destiny on his part. He was born a man that was named Beers, first of all.
Yes.
And destiny that you would never go in there. Now, has that persisted?
No, actually, my family dragged me in there one night, and that was my first time going in there.
When you turned...
That's part of the therapy for the trauma.
Yes, exactly. The trauma of my friend's grandfather.
When you turned 30.
And when you first went in there, did you say, "Oh, this isn't as bad as I expected it to be"?
Yes, you're right. They had the shuffleboard. I enjoyed that. I played pool.
I miss the shuffleboard.
I know. And I played pool in there. It was just a little bit different than what I thought it would be.
I have had both experiences when it was truly it was a dive bar.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And now it's upscale, much more upscale now than it was, but it's maintained a certain smell. I mean, decor. And there was this... there was a pool table at the back there, and I recall playing. It was still 25 cents then. It's still 25 cents, and isn't that a wonderful bargain, right, to get to play?
Yep.
But I was playing with a friend, and I was playing quite well. That's part of another episode of Katunkwit Chronicles that we talk about that particular Chi-Chi's Chi in an earlier episode. However, I'm playing pool, and I'm playing well, and this fella challenged me, and he had a leather vest and lots of insignias with skulls, and it was with a group of other fellas that were wearing lots of leather vests, and I'd heard them arrive, which was
On their bikes?
yeah, they're that's categorizing a whole group of people that are not necessary that we do that. However, these particular people dressed in this manner, and this particular burly fellow comes up, wants to play, and I said, "Fine." I said, "Do you want to play doubles?" He said, No, singles. So I happened to be playing well, and I ran up to the 8-ball, and I'm all the way to the 8-ball, and I'm gonna it's in front of the pocket. It's nothing to do except just
Sink
hit it
it.
in. And he went over to the front of the pocket, and he opened up his vest,
And there was a gun.
and there was.
Mm-hmm.
So you were right to have some concerns. So was Mr. Beers.
Okay, but that is really unsportsmanlike.
Yes,
No, let's just say he wanted to win.
there was unsportsmanlike. And
But at some point, I don't care if you're in a biker gang or whatever and a criminal, you're like, I have been bested.
Yes.
And you just let it go.
I did have to leave suddenly. So I never got to shoot.
Oh, you
the
didn't
final.
just scratch?
I didn't. I just, I said, Fred, we have to feed the cat. I forgot to feed the cat. And Fred and I were visiting. He was visiting me, and I said, we've got to feed the cat. He was like, he was pointing at the ball, and I said, got to go right now. So that's happens at the Katunkwit Cafe now and again.
Well, I have another little story about the Katunkwit Cafe. I had a girlfriend that lived just south of there, the house right next door, and there were these 2 windows that you could look through in her backyard into the bar. So we thought that was kind of cool as teenagers to go over and look in there and see who was in there. It was always the same people.
Is there a window in the back in the bar?
Yeah, there's 2 windows. Well, this is going back to
Right.
You know,
I mean, there's a window
Yeah.
behind the pool table area. I just never realized
yeah.
it.
There's the 2 people though. They're still there.
The same two
They're still
people.
there. Norm and the other guy from Cheers,
no.
right?
Well, many of those people already died,
Yeah.
but probably from cirrhosis. But that's okay.
Unfortunately, yeah. I believe I'm going to suggest that might be 7 Blue Green Lane. That's 7 Blue Green Lane, right where you were there. Yes, and you're looking in the window. Because I lived in that house for a short period of time.
Oh, really?
And
Yes.
did you complain about the noise? Because I remember for a while there was somebody living there who just constantly complained. And the question everybody had was, you bought a house that's about, 6 inches from a bar?
Yes,
What did
exactly.
you expect to happen?
Well, I did not complain. I just participated. So I had
Better to join him than to try and fight him.
yeah, the beer was inexpensive and, the food was okay. So I spent my time there. How old were you when you first moved here to Cotunkit? Or did you
Or
live
were
on-
you born
did you live-
here?
Did you live on another island somewhere else?
Well, actually, I was born in the adjoining town that is just east of here.
Oh.
Is it okay to say
Newport.
Newport?
Yeah.
I was born in Newport
Yeah.
because obviously there's no hospital in Cotunkit.
Don't say Newport.
Oh,
Okay, so Jane is our first pretty much real islander. I mean, there are some people who think you actually have to be born here.
I know. But unless you were at Mr. Bates's sanitarium where some people were born, or you were in Newport, there was no
Or
other,
you just couldn't get to the hospital in time.
right. There was no other place to be born.
Yeah.
Well, although some people were born at home, but my mother preferred to be in the hospital. What can I say?
Were any of your siblings born at home?
No. Nope.
So that was in the 1920s, right?
That's my father was born in 1920.
Were your parents islanders?
No, it's a funny story. My mother was from the Midwest, and when the war broke out, she had a phys ed degree, and she had the background. It's like pre-med and phys ed. So they had a thing at Harvard that said, if you come to Harvard and you have a pre-med criteria, you can go and get a physiotherapy degree in 1 year. So she did that. And she came here after she had been doing, teaching at playgrounds and so on in Wisconsin. So she came to Harvard and was in a class to learn physical therapy. She wanted to go into the service to help the servicemen. And my father was there in dental school, and they both were in the same boarding house. And they had a rule at the boarding house that said they didn't want any of the men dating the women in the boarding house because it would be uncomfortable if you broke up. So they had to hide that they were going out at that particular time.
Secret
A
romance.
secret romance. And my mother, God bless her soul, she it's okay I say this because she's long since passed, but she was 7 years older than my father. So
Oh,
my mother was
a cougar.
29 and my father was 22
Oh, wow.
when they got married, but you'd never know it.
So,
So that starts the story. My father went in the service, so my mother went to Wisconsin and brought my sister. She was born in January. And after they came back, my father was a dentist. His father was a dentist also in Newport at 130 Turo at the top of the hill. So my father took over his father's practice, and they lived there for a year or two when I was born. So what happened was my mother said, "We are not living under your father's thumb," because my grandfather charged for the rental of the apartment, for the rental of the dental space, for the rental of the equipment, for per patient, and so on. And my mother was strong enough to say, "We're not living here."
well,
So
you don't become a Royce without spending
that's-
some money. My goodness.
So it's an interesting what happened. They came to Jamestown and they looked at houses, and the house that I grew up in hadn't been lived in 20 years, and it belonged to an old sea captain. So they were going to, it was a mess, and they were going to tear it down. Well, the builder came and looked at it, and he said, "This really has strong structure, strong bones, and it's a lovely old home." It was designed by Charles Bevins, who's a famous artist or architect from Newport. And anyway, they looked at it and he said, if you could have a 25-year plan and just fix it up slowly. So that's exactly what my parents did. And because there was so many, there's one child born and another one, right after each other.
They know what causes that now.
I think they do. So anyway, they decided to slowly fix the house up, and they had to.
It's rock and roll, by the way. That's what causes it.
Oh, I see. Or a lack of rock and roll.
Okay.
So anyway, they fixed it over the years. So they did have the 25-year plan. And as a kid growing up there, we had a porch that was falling down, and we had iron beds and so on. But over the years,
That's hardcore. Iron beds. Yeah, that's not. I would never expect anything less from you, Jane.
well, maybe that made me a little stronger. I don't
Jane
know.
Royce, the Iron Bed woman.
The Iron Woman.
Did it have spikes just to keep you?
No. But
Okay.
slowly it was fixed over, and now the house is worth probably over $3 million.
Oh wow!
Crazy. And my parents spent $5,600 to buy it.
Oh,
And
It's crazy.
it was my,
They were stepping out.
My mother, who borrowed the money from her family. She didn't want anything to do with my father's father, with her father-in-law.
ooh,
Well, he was
The dirt.
He was very domineering, and he was very Victorian. He was the last child with 5 older sisters who doted on him, and as a result, he just felt like he could do anything that he wanted. And so my mother was like, "Not on my territory."
not with our $5,600 house.
That's right.
Is your the house still in your family?
No. My parents sold it in 1972 for probably about $100,000.
Yes.
But when you buy it for $5,600, $100,000 seems like a lot.
Yeah.
And it then went to a family that lived off of the island, and they never inhabited it. So it ended up a bunch of fishermen living there, and they had numbers on the rooms, and it was just rent. It was a mess. And so then another woman bought it, whose husband was an entrepreneur, and she sunk millions into it.
You know why fishermen have to have numbers on the doors? Because they've been down to Cotunquit Cafe too much.
And they can't remember where they live.
Speaking of cafes, and I have a question. I know Ashlyn has a question for you too, but I wanted to interject here. Do you recall the Polish American Club out on Cotunquit, Maine, out on the way to
The one that's a bunch of
West Ferry?
condos right now.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely.
You recall that? And
Of
what a nice
course.
experience that was, right? We put steak on a stainless steel rod, and we cooked our own steak, and then we raised money for people that needed help. And why were we always required to build playgrounds with our own cash? You know, that we
Remember the chair affair? That was at that club.
Yeah, we talked about the chair affair in a previous episode, and for 7 years I had a chair that was totally useless in the attic, and then I eventually had to heave it. I'm sorry. Could you answer the question?
Was there a question?
Was there a question in there?
Well, there was a question about that Polish American Club and just how what your experiences were. Did you ever dance there with your husband, Mark?
No. What they used to do is they had basketball games there. And
Oh yeah, because it was a gym.
there was a gym. And actually, this is a really funny story. Because my mother was a phys ed teacher, when we were growing up and there were 5 girls in our family, there was nothing for girls to do because the rec center was the boys' club and girls were not allowed in unless they were watching a boys' basketball game. So my mother said, I think I'm going to start a girls' basketball league. And she went to the Polish American Club and she asked if she could use it. And they said, sure, you can use it for free. So when I was in 3rd grade, she started a basketball league, and all the girls who are my age, a little older, a little younger, started basketball. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I was on 3 basketball teams
Yeah, of course.
because that's all there was. And that's the only night that I was allowed out to go and practice was for basketball.
Can you dunk still?
Only if I stand on a ladder.
I have not heard this whole thing that basically the rec center was only for the boys.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And we used to have roller skating on Friday nights. which was really fun. And then on Saturday was the boys' basketball games, and we would go. And you know how narrow it is, and it was just wide enough for a chair, so you were sitting along the edge.
Oh, yeah, I know
Or
that.
you were sitting on the stage.
So players must have landed in your lap occasionally.
Well, sometimes, but not very often. No.
Would I suggest that you must have developed some sort of protest and developed a grassroots decision to get out there and fight this plan.
Well, let me,
Sexist,
Well, that's what her mother was doing.
that's
misogynist
what
group.
my mother did. But actually, what's interesting is when I started teaching, Title IX had not gone through, and I don't know if I had 2 daughters at that point, but it came shortly after that. And I felt it was important for them to have a role model that was a female, that you could be an athlete, but you also could be a female and have the female characteristics. So what I did was I started a girls' basketball team, and I used to say to the girls, just put on a dark pair of shorts, a white T-shirt, get in my car, we're going to a school.
Yeah.
And I never got any money for anything. And then all of a sudden when Title IX went through, I was like, oh, I get paid for this? Oh, the girls have uniforms? Oh, we can use the gym, and we have the bus at our
Disposal. Yeah.
disposal. So it was a huge learning for me. And I think that because my mother had sort of set that precedent for me, that I felt it was important to give back to the
That's
community
wonderful
also.
that you had a supportive parent there that was guiding you too.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've served as role model for many women, young women in this community, through your teaching, through your coaching, and even as you participate now in sport. So we were all, enamored with your ability. You're an amazing athlete.
Well, thank you. He probably has to say that, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, only during the podcast.
Yeah,
Don't
there you
expect it. I'm not going to announce it at a town council meeting. So, Ashlyn, what do you have for Jane?
Oh, I have a question about something that almost happened in Katunkwit, and I think it was it Commerce Oil?
Oh, yes.
They wanted to put a
Wow.
refinery.
Yep.
Yeah. What's the? It seems so crazy now to think
Well, this
that.
is a very interesting story because Dr. Miner, who lived in New Jersey for years and years and years and had lived near refineries, and he was the only one that said, you don't want to do this. I grew up in that area in New Jersey, and it really is awful. And he was fighting it by himself. And what happened was the town really didn't have a lot of jobs for people, and the economy wasn't really that great in the 50s. So he was fighting an uphill battle, and he finally got the Navy, and a lot of admirals lived on the island. He finally got the Navy behind him because they realized that if they had ships coming up the bay with these big, tankers and so on, unloading and so on, it would have been awful. So that turned it around, and they fought it. And so all the middle of Katunkwit was all Commerce Oil, and they sat on it for years and years and years. And then when the prices went up, they started to sell off that land. That's where West Reach and East Passage came from.
So did Commerce Oil own that land from way back? This was a plan. When did this whole idea even start? Oh, let's put a refinery on this island in this pristine bay. And
Well, it goes way back to probably the 50s. And what happened was there was a lawyer here who was privy to this information. So he started to buy up property at the north end, knowing that Commerce Oil was coming in.
Inside
Information. And then what happened was when all of this was going on, he obviously lost some of that momentum that was going to be there for selling it. So it was interesting. And it was, I think, Mrs. McGann that wrote the book about that whole thing that happened.
Do you recall some history about the potential for, what would you call it, like a canal running through Great Creek, and then right from like Miller's Cove through Great Creek and out to the west.
Bay.
Yeah, the west side of the island.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because in my garden club, they just came across some information, and this was just maybe a year ago that it was brought to our attention that there was a person or a company that wanted to buy that, open that up, and then have a big marina in there.
Oh.
And so the garden club and all the people there fought it.
Mm.
And so it ended up with just the little fishing shack that's there, because it would have been awful to dredge that, open that up. That's where a lot of the marsh area is, that a lot of the birds and animals and stuff thrive in that area, and it would have been awful.
Mm.
So I was appreciative that this information came to light, and there was a certain amount of people that fought for it,
Just
or
as
against it.
in every era, there's been threat to the Cotuncquit Island from different factions. And now, what do you think the greatest threat is now as we move forward here?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I'm on the zoning board, as you probably know, and a lot of things come before us that I'm just shaking my head like, how is this possible? So finally, at one of the meetings, I said, why do we have zoning laws if we're not going to be using them? And then I started to defend why this person had a right to not have someone build 2 feet from their property. What I see happening is we need to tighten the rules about the zoning. We have too many smaller homes that fit into a lovely area that are being torn down and build these monstrous homes. We're trying to contain it, but right now we're in limbo because the zoning that hadn't been done anything in 15 years now has been 4 or 5 years that they've been working on this, and it's still not a fluid plan yet. It's not solid yet. So they're still working on it, and it's frustrating to someone who sees this happening and you can't make it go fast enough.
You have to be very, very patient when you do anything
I know.
in government, right?
But Cotuncquit had this issue where they wanted to put a highway barn, and they've been working on it in the 50s. In the 50s, it was always, oh, we're going to put it up near the dump. Oh, we're going to put it over here, whatever. Well, the dump was actually, they bought a piece of property and we're going to put it there. And then we had someone get on the town council who lived in an area, and that was their one issue.
Yeah, well, the biggest issue is we're all going to be very thirsty at some point because this water's going to run out. And,
That's another big issue.
we have to be concerned about all these things.
Sea level rise.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you have another question, Ashlyn, for this young lady?
No, I think we're having a really nice discussion about
It's cool stuff.
Cotuncquit history. It would be crazy to imagine now, that canal actually having been built and an oil refinery. And it would, can you imagine
No.
the whole area?
Ships running through the middle of the...
We have enough
Cotuncquit.
ships as it is, but can you imagine?
That's an interesting point because as a child, with the house that I grew up, which was right on the water, we had a big mic that was in front of us, our house, where they tied up the destroyers. And so as a kid, we used to go out on our roof because they would put up a great big screen on the destroyer to watch a movie. And my father would say, get in the house. You're too young to be watching these movies.
Can you imagine how tame that movie must have been for a bunch of sailors aboard a ship?
Oh, I'm sure.
Imagine that. But there were times that, were you on the, correct me, were you on the east or the west side of Cotuncquit?
We're on the east side.
Okay, so
Our view was Rose Island.
Oh, so you were able to witness the torpedo testing out there in
Well,
No, that's
real
farther
time?
north.
Yeah, that was a little bit north of us. But
Okay.
what's interesting is when my father moved his office had a great big picture window, so it was looking out on the bay, and he had a big spyglass, and every single ship that came in or went out, he had a little book and he recorded it. And actually, back in the late 50s or early 60s, there was a tanker that came through and it was carrying oil, and it got caught on the reef, and it listed and it started spilling oil. And my father actually saw it because he heard the noise. He saw it with the spyglass and he called it into the Coast Guard.
Oh,
And in those days, they didn't have anything to clean up that spill.
Mm.
And all along the shore in Newport and Cotunkit, it was just black tar everywhere, in front of our house, in front of all the houses along that shore.
That remained for a long time.
It
Because,
remained for a long,
yeah,
long time.
we still see bits of that now
Yep.
and again. Yeah. Well, it's been really wonderful visiting with you. I'm going to play a little music right now. Followed by a wave. And we have to pay the bills. So we have Jane here today, so I'm going to read the upcoming commercial break here, but I was hoping that you could have a comment or two about these businesses after we finish, or even during the whole thing. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Lenny and Maria's Daily Catch. Lenny is a guy that fishes from the bulkhead at West Ferry Dock daily. He'll catch the fish, cut the fish, fillet the fish, ice the fish, and even suggest ways to cook the fish. But he doesn't eat fish, ironically. Lenny and his wife Maria are at West Ferry Bulkhead daily. Come anytime and pick up some pan-frying scup, some sea bass fillets, and even the occasional striper. With Lenny and Maria's Daily Catch, come early because it's catch as catch can with Lenny and Maria. Don't get shut out. Do you know Lenny and Maria?
I do not.
Oh, I know them well. They're great.
Eat a lot of fish?
Oh, that's all I eat. Patty's Poison-Free Patio Block Weed Removal Incorporated is a full-service patio block weed removing company. With Patty's, we never use any chemicals to remove your pesky midsummer patio block weeds, and we get in between each block with a sharp knife and cut them free. We aren't the fastest weed removal company, but we get them all, says Patty O'Neill, owner and operator. Patty's Poison-Free Patio Block Weed Removal Incorporated. That's quite a name. You might want to get an acronym for that, Patty. We were also sponsored by Immersion Sunblock LLC. Here's a good idea. Immersion Sunblock LLC is the company that installs immersion sunblock booths in your own home as part of the shower process. With Immersion Sunblock LLC, we bring the block to your block. Recommend us on the block, your block, and receive 70 free sunblock cartridges for the season. Whether we install our sunblock immersion spritzer in your home or in your outdoor shower, we'll provide the expertise to block the sun on your block. Keep cancer at bay while playing on the bay each day. Never forget the block again with Immersion Sunblock LLC installed in your shower.
That's actually a very interesting concept.
I think so too. Yes. It's maybe something we all ought to invest in. Perhaps we should get oil refineries up in the north part of town, too, Cotunkit. You thought travel agencies were a thing of the past? Nobody wants to plan a vacation, book a flight, book a train, a ferry, a series of unknown hotels. With Cotunkit Travel, you tell us where you want to go, and we go with you. It's a personal travel experience for your whole family. Mention a destination at our initial meeting, say Athens, Greece, and we'll hook you up with the finest hotels, provide tourist experiences unparalleled, and get you home in comfort. With Cotunkit Travel, your first move is to apply for and receive a personal Cotunkit Travel credit card backed by the number 1 creditor and travel visa. Upon approval of $25,000 or more, we will book the hell out of that card, and you'll love the experience of just picking a destination and a date. We also do weddings and bachelor and bachelorette destination parties. If your credit's good, we consider you your every need. Stop by CT, that's Cotunkit Travel, and pick up some old-fashioned maps. We have hundreds of them laying around from all over the world. I bet you would enjoy those maps.
I love reading maps. I used to teach maps and how to read maps when I was taught 6th grade.
Yeah. Cotunkit. Yeah, you're familiar with the Cotunkit map that's right here.
Yes, I am. A little bit.
Intimately.
As a matter of fact, I went to the town hall when I was teaching the unit on the history of Cotuncquit, and they gave me a giant map for about $5. And I would put it on the back bulletin board. It filled the board. And the kids in the class used to go up and they'd say, "Oh, I live here. I live here." And I said, "Well, take a little thing and put it down where your address is." It made them respond to and see how big Cotuncquit is. You know?
Well, probably can't get away with that now. You can't divulge anyone's address now as a teacher. There's all kinds of HIPAA rules, I'm sure, or whatever.
One of the reasons I left teaching, it changed way too much.
Yeah, that's true. So what, of all those places that are indicated on that Cotuncquit map, where do you find the most solace? You know, where's that point in that map that you feel?
Well, it's
great?
Interesting. I guess it varies from time to time, but I always really liked Rat Tail. I'm so sorry.
Rat Tail.
Rat Tail. Rat Tail, is that the name?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. I just found it interesting, when they uncovered where the original structure was. That was eye-opening to me to see how close that it was to the edge. And then to go way back in the history to like the 1400s when the Indians actually used to go out there and they would start little fires, to warn people. That was the only way they had of warning someone that there was land here because it just popped up.
Oh, so that's like the predecessor to the lighthouse was
Yes.
just burning a fire out there.
Burning fire, yep.
So they were warning the English ships to not hit the rocks, but it would have been better for them to just let the fires burn out and just have a disaster because it didn't work out at all for folks.
I know.
I mean, I hopefully turn around sometime.
Well, and there's another little place, and that's the place that I go to the beach, where as a child we used to walk along the shore where I grew up down to the beach and have little bathhouses and so on. And then in the hurricane of '54, it was washed across the street. And my
Seems like it was just this winter too, washed across the street. Everything was washed across the street.
I know. This was really bad though, and my mother had just bought us brand new bathing suits, so she went down and went across the street into the marsh, and the bathhouses were tipped on the side. She opened the door and got our new bathing suits out. Waste not, want not.
Oh, that happened to me too. There was a fella that was just looking around in the marsh after a big storm, and I thought he was just looking for, things that you can find like wood and stuff to put in the yard, old lobster pots. But he was looking for his wallet because he had been swimming, and his wallet went, and
wow.
It had $800 in it, and we found it.
In the marsh?
We found it after the storm in the marsh.
With the money still in it?
With the money in it.
Why would you go to the beach with $800?
Yeah, that
is
seems-
my question number one.
Well,
And leave your wallet somewhere.
The Dell's lemonade is expensive. You might want. You could get maybe.
Maybe if you're investing in it.
Was this after the banking crisis? Because I recently was chatting with somebody who told me they keep quite a bit of cash on hand because of the credit union banking.
Yeah. Well, if you belong to a credit union, it's a little different than belonging to a, FDIC bank.
Yeah, so they lived through that and they were like, nope, I have to keep like thousands of dollars around.
Oh.
Whereas I'm like, you need cash? Let me look in a pocket and see if I can find
I
some.
found something.
I'm not going to talk about that. There is.
On to the next thing.
Why aren't we talking about that?
Well, who wants to tell anybody else about how much cash they're hanging on to?
Well, everybody can know I have no cash.
Okay.
Or me either.
Okay. I have a little bit for golf. Okay, so on that topic, though, quickly, the same storm, found the 800 the following day. We pulled an Ashland Comoric family, Stewart and Ashland moved, and we went out there with our kids, our most precious persons in our lives, just prior to the storm, and decided that we're going to do some body surfing. Now, not a good idea. Not a good idea at all, because the waves looked like they were normal, like normally very big, but normal and reasonable.
Have you ever lived through a hurricane before?
Yes, several of them, but nothing like you have. But this
Okay.
one, this particular wave, swept my youngest daughter underneath that building you're talking about. It was very frightening. And don't ever do that. Don't go out in the storms and take those risks, because you'll die.
Well, when we were kids, when the hurricane of '54 came, my parents made us stay in the house, and the water was, even though it was a big drop in front of our house, we lost 13 feet in front of our house, and my parents were worried we were going to lose the house. It was coming closer and closer and closer. And the yacht club used to be right down the street for us, so we had picture windows all around, so I could look out and see and these were wooden boats in those days. They didn't have fiberglass necessarily, and they only had these chains with something holding it down below.
An old radiator.
Well, or an old engine block.
Yeah.
A lot of people use that. So as a child looking out there, even though I was quite young, I could see all these boats breaking loose of their moorings, crashing against the rocks. And there was a boat that was probably about 65 to 80 feet long in front of our house that these people, can I mention names or no?
No.
Okay. That
No, I'm just kidding. You can name some names that...
Bert Broden and his future father-in-law were working on this massive, beautiful boat. And it was all wooden, and it smashed against the rocks in front of our house. It was just...
Did it occupy the 13 feet of space that was removed? That must be worth probably about $80,000-$90,000 for that 13 feet that you lost.
More than that now. But as a result, we walked downtown, and where the yacht club was, which wasn't destroyed at that point, but the dock was a mess, there was a big hole in the sidewalk, and my mother fell, and she was pregnant with my sister, who was born September 19th, shortly after that. And it was very scary as a little kid walking down the street and seeing this. And when you went into town, it was just debris everywhere, all over the place. It was boat parts. It was, part of the ferry boat. It was just a mess. And that's something that you don't forget as a child.
No.
Especially when you've seen it happen in front of you. And then when the eye of the storm went by, we went outside and were playing, and my mother and father yelled for us to get in because the storm wasn't finished. The hurricane was not finished.
Oh, and you probably didn't realize.
We had no idea.
You're
we
in
were
the
just
eye of
little
it.
kids,
Sure.
Yeah, it was very scary.
That reminds me, though, you suggested that you never forget, and you haven't forgotten. But the people that forget, seemingly, are the people that lose their homes on the water and then rebuild immediately in that back same spot. That always, concerns me. I don't understand that. And maybe they just, I don't know. It just...
Well, they love the spot. They have a lot of memories there and raising their families and stuff, and so they want to bring it back. But
they don't want to give it up.
I don't think they're realizing the danger. Now, when the Bayview was in disrepair, my brother-in-law actually was the architect that designed it, the new one. And they had the regulations that you had to build up so that if you had a storm surge, it would come through where the cars are parked. It would not hit the Bayview itself. Mm. And when he designed it, he said, I want something that will look exactly like it used to look way back in the day. Mm. And one of the stipulations was they had to have a restaurant. Well, the restaurant really never took off.
They had a fire.
Well, they may have had that, but it was more that the restaurant just was not desirable. It was very small.
I liked it, though.
Well, it was okay, but
very good view.
It did not make it through several of the winters, so it ended up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, winter's tough on a restaurant.
Yep.
Tougher, almost tougher than hurricanes. Okay, so we are aware that you have to depart, but is it time for you to depart, or would you like to hear part of this short story that I intend to read, which is not that short, but it's kind of fun. It should be funny.
Well, to be honest, I'll listen to it on the podcast. How's that?
Okay, please be honest with us. We're all friends.
Jane has a very important date.
Yes, I do.
Yes, you do. Okay, well, it's been great visiting with Jane Royce. She's an amazing woman that has a wealth of knowledge about this town, Katunquit, and other towns in the area, Jamestown and others, and has been, and she mentioned Rose Island also. So all of these places had sort of define us, and I think you are a very good representative of this community and its community's base, which I feel stronger as a member of the community, knowing you and I consider you a friend.
Well, thank you. I consider both of you friends, and I have to say, my father and mother are the ones that set the example. My father was on the original building committee that built the Lawn Avenue School. He was on the water commission. My mother's the one that started the basketball and so on. Everything was give back to the community, which is why I probably turned out the way that I am. That I love this community, and for the Historical Society I was on for 23 years. They kept asking me, come back, we need you here. All right, I'll do it for a little more. Anyway, it's just been...
It's time to leave when you're actually making history because you're still on the committee.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me here. I've enjoyed this, and
All right.
good luck to you with your podcast.
Thanks, Jane.
What we'll do is we're going to give you the trumpet, the wave, and the exit.
Okay.
There she goes.
There's Jane.
Jane Royce. Wow.
She's fun.
She is fun. You must have really enjoyed working with her.
Yeah, I mean, in my role, I don't, interact that much with the teachers. I'm in the background doing the network and so on, but yep, Jane's great. And I do work with Jane's husband, Mark, so.
Oh, Mark, yeah, he's a great guy. Great guy. Mark, very much. Also, very good athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I think he taught physical education.
Yes, he did.
And he did it the right way, didn't he? Yes, he did. This story I'm about to read is called Luke and the Hairy Spider. It's a little longer than most stories that I read. However, I believe you'll find it somewhat humorous at times. So
I can't wait.
It's okay to laugh if there is an occasion. It's called Luke and the Hairy Spider. Luke was out of work again. It seemed a streak of jobs that didn't quite fit after not getting the big job he'd prepared his entire career to garner. He groomed himself into a professional, but at the moment that counted most, he wasn't considered a strong enough candidate to get the job. So Luke compressed his disgust, his grief, and disappointment, and he just moved on to the first job available without grieving properly, without a full all-in mindset. Luke was less than effective, so once again he found himself out of a job at 45. 2 children, a wife, mortgage, car payments, all the trappings of a proper lower middle-class life, just no job. Luke took on projects around the house to fill his time while he looked to work again, justifying his self-worth through manual tasks that he had neglected for years. He rebuilt a white picket fence that had collapsed into many segments, rotted in others, probably should have been replaced, but Luke felt it necessary to resurrect the fence, paint it white, connect to something symbolically connected to the wreck his own life had become. He wasn't sure of anything else, but he was sure that he could rebuild the fence and paint it white. He completed the fence while rebuilding both outbuildings and fixing the cracks in the basement foundation. As summer slipped into autumn, Luke connected with a sculptor in the area and discussed art and literature for hours on the back porch. He listened to his new, slightly older friend, Lawson, speak about his own journey to glass sculpting. Lawson had developed an unhealthy process of etching large glass objects for major installations around the world. Luke was fascinated with Lawson's freedom of thought, his mastery of one art form that brought him to seeming success. Their daughters, the same age, they They too became friends, and Luke benefited from Lawson's love of farming. On a sunny yet crisp September morning, Luke decided to cut the lawn. It had been a dry summer and hadn't needed to cut the lawn often this season, but as the cooler fall temperatures during the nighttime and shorter days became noticeable, tufts of grass had spotted his backyard, and he was determined to make the yard uniform in appearance. Luke started the lawnmower, trimmed at the edges of the property with a mower where bushes encroached on the grass. The revving engine mower surged into each bush as Luke attempted to remove emerging underbrush from beneath the bushes and the shrubs. He first felt something in his knee, instinctively swatting at it with his left hand, driving it to the ground where it paused for a second. It was a hairy spider, the size of the end of his pinky finger. It scurried away. He checked his right knee where it landed, sweeping at the spot with his right hand, when Luke noticed a second hairy spider on the final knuckle of his right hand. It clutched at his skin on the back of his hand, and as Luke attempted to swat it with his left hand, he realized that he had waited too long and the spider bit, just as Luke knocked it from his hand. The lawnmower sputtered to a stop, backfiring as it seemingly objected to its role. Luke shook his hand several times. Pain surged to his fingertips. His finger became numb. His right hand swelled at the sight of the bite. He entered the house and washed it thoroughly under cold water. He rinsed it further in the bathroom sink with peroxide and alcohol, dried the bite site, and bandaged it thoroughly, using watertight bandaging. Luke was no stranger to injury and first aid care. He treated himself and others during his career as a professional soccer coach. Luke went on to finish the lawn, and while drinking lemonade and resting, he even iced the area. Swelling didn't get worse, so he went on digging potatoes from his garden and organizing the shed. 3 days later, Luke hosted his friend Lawson and Richard on his back porch. The three were discussing music. I took a break from music during the disco era. I didn't have anything against music, the musicians, or the dancing. I just didn't buy into the whole thing, Richard announced to the other two men, both nodding in unison. Yeah, I was never accepted. I could dance, but I never cared for anything structured in my dancing, Luke said in agreement, his right arm outstretched for emphasis. As Luke reached out to express himself with his right arm, he felt a pain just below his elbow on the inside of his arm. It seemed swollen as he felt the site with his left hand. He even announced, "I have a lump in my arm. I wonder what this is." He thought aloud as he pushed hard on the lump. His arm instantly turned red and began swelling for all the men to see. "That's not good," Lawson announced as he looked away, almost gagging as he did. You gotta do something soon," Richard said while getting up and dumping his lemonade into the potted plant on the deck and retreating through the front back door, his hand on the latch, door open as if he were a prisoner trying to escape. Let me know how you make out. Get to a doctor, man. Do it soon." "I'd take you to the doctor's office, but I have to pick up Samantha in a half hour and pick up some pickles at BJ's. I'm pickling my cucumbers, and they have those huge jars, and I dump those store-bought pickles, just throw them right out, and just use the juice. Call me," he says as he too leaves the yard. Luke's arm doubled in size. A red stripe ran from the site of the injured area of the bite to his bicep. He called his wife, but wasn't able to reach her. Her secretary answered after 17 rings. "Stern, Hams, and Collins. How may I help you?" she answered unenthusiastically. "Teresa, is Colleen there? I need to talk to her." "You and everyone else. She must have 50 calls. She's in the field today. Look at the property." "She's looking at property. It's all day, Luke. There's no reception." "I've been trying," Teresa said. "Okay, tell her if you hear from her to call me." "Okay, will do." "You sound stressed. Is everything okay?" Teresa asked. "Fine, just fine. Ask her to call, that's all." Luke began driving south. He headed toward the nearest hospital, but he didn't want to pay the walk-in copay of $100. So he saw a walk-in clinic on the Rotary in Narragansett and swung into the parking lot, steering with his good arm his good hand and arm, and cradling his massively heavy and swollen right arm in his lap. His fingers looked like sausages. His arm 3 times their original size. He parked quickly into 2 spaces and ran through the sliding automatic doors into a dark hallway, following signs to the clinic. An overworked secretary sat amidst piles of paperwork and folders. Her head remained down as she asked, "What type of insurance do you have?" "Blue Cross Gold," Luke responded. "First-time patient?" she asked. "First time, but it's kind of urgent," Luke responded while leaning into the window, protecting the secretary from the waiting room patients. The secretary never looked up. "Not so close, and everyone has something urgent. Take a seat, fill out the paperwork. The doctor will see you in an order of arrival," she says, as she lifted the clipboard up, while swinging the board, suggesting that Luke move back from the window. Luke backs away, and with his good arm, lifts his swollen arm and hand up to receive the clipboard. Sweat is dripping from his upper lip and brow as he leans in, attempting to open his infected hand. The secretary stands, rushes to the locked door, and ushers Luke into the examination room while not shutting the door. "Sit here, now," she says firmly. Dr. Small, I need you now," the secretary said while holding Luke's left shoulder, even towing his brow while the two wait. Dr. Small enters the room in seconds as a nurse arrives and takes over for the secretary. "Why'd you come here?" she asked. "It said you were open, and I didn't want to pay the copay at the hospital. Also, I thought the lines would be shorter," Luke responded. "No, what's the nature of your condition?" Dr. Small says. Her broad face and concerned, caring eyes worked over Luke as if she were an investigator on the scene of a crime. "Oh, I pushed on this spot on my arm, and my arm blew up," Luke responded. "Which spot? Exactly. Show me," Doctor asked. "Here," Luke says, while pushing hard on the lump in his arm. No, show me. Don't push on the spot. You have an infection. See this red line?" she says, while following the line above Luke's tan line as she lifted his shirt. "This could have killed you. You know that. There's still time, though," she said, kind of scolds Luke as she speaks. "Call an ambulance now," she directs her words to the nurse behind her. "Let's get him on the examination table. Lie down. What's your name, sir?" "Luke Stanton." "What caused this infection, Luke Stanton?" Doctor asks. "I don't know. I was just having a conversation with my friend." Luke answers as Dr. Small examines his arm and hand, gently touching the red skin and compressing his wrist while she searches for the site of infection. "What's this?" she asks while pointing to the back of Luke's hand. "It's a spider bite, probably, like 3 days ago," Luke says. "What kind of spider?" she asks. "I don't know, but it was hairy, I know that. One on my knee, one on my hand," Luke says with slurred words, almost wondering why he can't speak properly. "I think you're infected at the time of the bite, Mr. Stanton, and you released toxins into your arm from an infected lymph gland, sir. This is very serious." Dr. Small says while taking Luke's blood pressure and temperature. Paramedics arrive. Dr. Small starts. Patient's 49 years of age, BP 208 over 99, temperature is 102. Apparent massive infection, possibly toxicity or origin of infection right hand, all the risk factors unknown. He just walked in off the street, said he had a spider bite 3 days ago. Luke passed out on the gurney, transported to the hospital, placed on an antibiotic drip for 5 days, returned home. Luke couldn't keep anything in his system. As soon as he ate any food at all, his intestinal tract spit it through at high speed as his bowel movements jetted from his rectum like a fire hose. It wasn't long before Luke noticed blood in the underwear, but he just kept on shitting and shitting until he was only shitting blood. He called his colorectal doctor. He had a colorectal doctor because Luke had jumped the gun on getting a colonoscopy. His family history with intestinal disease led him to go a year earlier than the recommended exam at the age of 50. His doctor's office worked through the required insurance permissions for an early test, so it was a relief when Dr. Cohn said, "You're clean as a whistle," in his New York Bronx accent. He liked Dr. Cohn. They had a history, so it was a natural decision to see Cohn. I'm bleeding badly, Luke called out through the phone with urgency. To whom am I speaking? The answering agent asked. Luke Stanton. I'm a patient of Dr. Cohn's. I recently saw him, but now I'm bleeding. Do you think that you're bleeding from the colonoscopy you had 3 weeks ago? The answer agent says while notifying me that this is a recorded message. No, it's from a spider bite, Luke said. A spider bite, sir? Where were you bitten? In the hand. Dr. Cohn is a colorectal surgeon, Mr. Stanton. You're bleeding from the rectum, correct? I got an infection and I'm bleeding from shitting too much. Yeah, no, from the penicillin, Luke yelled into the phone. Don't get upset, sir. Please, I'm trying to help. I need to see Dr. Cohn right away, Luke responded. I'll find a way to sneak you in, and you'll wait in the waiting room for a while. How far are you from the east side, she asked. I'll be there in 40 minutes, Luke said, and hung up the phone. Luke drove to Providence in 30 minutes, weaving in and out of traffic as he used the emergency lane to bypass traffic, honking his horn for the entire ride. He could feel the blood welling beneath him in a fabric of seat beneath him. He entered the small waiting room and advanced across the room with blood dripping down his pants. As it stained his white sneakers, bloody spots dotted the light-colored wooden floor. Luke approached the window and slid the window open hurriedly. I'm bleeding, she yelled. Everyone's bleeding. Please be more reserved, sir, the receptionist said in a hushed tone. Luke turned around, revealing his bloody pants and shoes. Why'd you come here? You belong in a hospital, sir. Come in now. The doctor will see you and we'll try to clean you up. Luke entered the examination room, removed his shoes, placing a Johnny in with the back open. Dr. Cohn entered the room. Mr. Stanton, you have some extensive bleeding here, he said, as he turns to Luke around, doesn't even bend over in the prone position as customary when visiting colorectal surgeons. Yes, it's been awful, Luke responded. I'll call the paramedics and they will get you over to the hospital in a few minutes, and we're going to do some surgery today. You've somehow severed your colon. If we don't do surgery now, you could bleed to death, but we're going to fix you, Mr. Stanton. Don't worry, Dr. Cohn said assuredly. For the second time in less than a week, Luke was being carted away from a doctor's office by paramedics. A few weeks after the surgery, Luke recovered and returned to a visit with Dr. Cohn. He met the same receptionist behind the glass window, who seemed to be waiting for him as she smiled and nodded her head repeatedly as Luke spoke. Nurse Denise McComb will be out to visit with you in a waiting room shortly. Have a seat. I'll only be a minute, the receptionist said after a while, smiling seemingly too long, making her smile seem somewhat disingenuous. I wonder why she's sending a nurse in the waiting room to greet me. That's weird, Luke thought to himself as he chose a seat in the crowded waiting room with an open seat for this mysterious nurse, Denise. Denise McComb enters the waiting room, and both men and women in the room take notice. She wore surgical pants, but incongruously wore a fashionable, tight-fitting top with a pocket above her left breast that held an expensive gold pen. Mr. Stanton, she announced as she entered the room. Here, Luke said while raising his hand and smiling like a schoolchild. Come right this way, Mr. Stanton, she said as she turned on toe as if dancer and waited with her right hand as if she were leading a horse. She waved with her right hand as if she were leading a horse. Luke would follow her out anyway, his jaw noticeably relaxed, his mouth open, as if he saw a shooting star. Nurse Denise McComb guides him to an examination room and asks him a million questions about his recovery. Luke was trying to be cool about his surgery, downplay the first week of extraordinary pain, so as to not scare this young woman. As he answered the questions, he first noticed her teal blue eyes, the kind of eyes that make a person look again and again to make sure they're real. Luke liked everything about this woman, but really set in and thought of his family at home, his work, wife at work, and the fantasy ended as fast as it appeared, as Denise guided Luke to yet another room, this time to the room equipped with machines and tables, including bent over in prone-like positions, clearly evident as he sat and waited for the doctor. This was the room that Luke dreaded being in, but after all, Dr. Cohn had done the surgery on his ass, and That's a few more looks from a doctor that sees a lot of asses going, you know. As Luke sat down, Denise excused herself and said, Dr. Cohn will be right with you. And she left. Luke was exceedingly pleased at her leaving from this next part. Dr. Cohn walked in the room, his yarmulke neatly placed atop his head, with what Luke presumed were bobby pins beneath the sacred head covering. Hello, Mr. Stanton. Why, you have a movie star name, don't you? You have a movie star name, don't you? I guess. Sounds like a name you might find out in the Hamptons, you know. I'm a little surprised that Denise didn't ask you to put on the jumpsuit. Here it is. I'll look away while you undress, Dr. Cohn says as Luke quickly removes his clothes and changes into the open-back jumpsuit as the doctor referred to the thin garment. This shouldn't take long, Luke. I do excellent work, just need to check on the scar, okay? He laughs as he motions for me to get on the table in the downward-facing dog position. Assume the position, he says while chuckling. Luke lifts himself onto the table and bends over. As he does, the doctor's phone rings, and he swabs Luke's rectum with Vaseline, removes his gloves, and picks up the phone. Hello, Mom. Yeah, I'm fine. Judith's fine. We're all fine. Oh, I'm with Mr. Stanton. Mom. Yes, he'll be okay. Simple surgery, positive post-operative exam. Mom, don't worry about Mr. Stanton. I have to go now, Mom. Enjoy your day. I'm sure it's hot in Manhattan, of course. Sunscreen, yes. I'll tell Mr. Stanton, too. Bye. Bye, Mom. This is time. Bye, okay? Your last, Mom. You say bye, you say it. Good. Dr. Cohn finishes conversation with his mother, returns to Luke's greasy ass. She's very concerned about me. You too. My mother's a saint. She calls twice a day. I have to take the call. Sometimes I'm in surgery. It's awful. Yeah, Luke gasps as Dr. Cohn swipes his finger along his rectum. Sorry, it's preemptive touching. There's going to be a lot of touching of this area. It's a warning. I'm going to do a digital rectal exam, then a sigmoidoscopy. Is the digital exam data-based? Luke asked as Dr. Cohn shoved his finger up his ass and began swinging his finger around as if he were enjoying the examination. Luke bellowed aloud. That's all done. So far, so good, but we need to use a tool this time. I don't like the sounds of that. I might need a bit of time to recover, Doctor. I've never had any fingers up my ass. Luke spit out the words from his larynx, not from his abdomen, as his abdomen had been temporarily compromised. Dr. Cohn shows the sigmoidoscopy tool, as he so appropriately called it, as the only thing Luke could equate this tool to was the largest metal penis he'd ever seen. I'm not sure seeing it's too reassuring. Will that fit in my colon? Luke asked. You'd be surprised what fits in a colon. People are often placing things in their colon that defy logic and the natural direction of the digestive tract. It's awful, Dr. Cohn says in a heavy New York accent. Be ready now. Loosen up down there. Don't fight me, Luke. Okay, ready, now. Dr. Cohn sends the metal penis into the rectum and widens the tool to reveal Luke's colon. What do you see? Luke asked while in great distress. Not as much as I'd like. All good to that point, but I need more, Dr. Cohn says, while retracting the metal penis and slipping it out in one motion. Dr. Cohn removes his gloves and flicks them in the hazmat red container. You stay right here, he says. I'm not going anywhere, Luke says. Dr. Cohn flicks a button on his phone, and the receptionist answers on the speakerphone. Yes, Dr. Cohn, she says politely. Send in Denise with the long one. No, the sigmoidoscope, just the big one. Okay, thank you. Door clicks, and Denise enters. Luke can see her as he lifts his head, craning his neck, back, and up like a turtle, stationary and hobble on all fours and vulnerable. Dr. Cohn renews his relationship with Luke's ass, replacing copious amounts of Vaseline in the area to be affected. Denise moves behind Luke, as Luke can see the long one as she passes it to the colorectal genius, Dr. Cohn. She has a full view of Luke now. Luke, suddenly feeling the need to stall this next phase, calls out, Denise, do you think this will affect our relationship? Just as Dr. Cohn inserts the long one in one quick motion. Dr. Cohn and Denise begin laughing uncontrollably as Luke can feel each of their expressions of hilarity through the long one as the tool wiggled within his lower body as the doctor attempting to somehow remain professional and complete the examination. Denise stops laughing and holds Luke's waist as the doctor seemingly sought out some personal demons with the so-called tool. You're clean, Dr. Cohn announces as he flicks his gloves off and disposes them in the trash. Denise gently swabbed Luke's rectum with gauze pads and provided a warm, soapy cloth for Luke to clean up with as she removed the instruments from the examination area. Luke put on his clothes, buttoning his shirt slowly, and realized that he'd buttoned up unevenly. He wanted to just leave it that way and go, but Denise noticed and started buttoning from the top, rebuttoning his entire shirt. Lou looked for her teal-colored eyes while she worked. She only looked up at him when finished. Don't worry. I see this happen all day. It's always the same. This time you made us laugh. Thank you, she said, as she lifted my coat from the coat rack and helped me with my coat. That was surreal, Luke said. I'll never forget you, though, Denise responded. Yeah, neither will Cohn, Luke said as he walked through the examination room and turned the wrong way, reversing himself before finding the exit for the waiting room. Mr. Stanton, don't forget to pick up your follow-up to the follow-up visit reminder card, the receptionist announced. Oh, there's more, Luke said. Oh, there's more, she said. Luke and the Hairy Spider.
I'm afraid to ask if this is an autobiographical story.
I think that's an unfair question.
Only because
it's quite revealing if
where
it was.
would your mind come up with this transition from the spider bite and the potential infection, which I totally understand, to the whole bleeding out colon problem?
There's very little fiction here. It's all related. Oh, when they gave me so much antibiotic that it just wiped out the system, and then there was this crack in the colon. Just couldn't take the stress of. Very revealing, however. But men have to go through this. Women have to go through these torturous experiences with doctors and nurses and everything else.
Yeah.
Men and women and all kinds of experiences.
But how Luke ended up, just kind of ignoring the spider bite to begin with.
Yeah, because Luke's like you. You planted your face in the middle of an oak tree and decided that you were going to keep riding. We are more alike than... Mm-hmm. Well, Luke is more like you than... and Yeah, so that's the story of Luke Stanton. And...
poor Luke.
But the doctor had a great sense of humor, and he had this mother that called him during the visit, which was really wild for the person that's in that position, for the doctor to take a call. Somewhat unprofessional, but I thought it was hilarious. This doctor was the best, absolute best at these kinds of things, and did save Luke Stanton's life because Luke Stanton was bleeding to death. So,
All from a spider bite.
and it wasn't. I found out it was recluse. Yeah. So
Which can cause all sorts. I'm surprised, I thought when that bit you, your skin around there started to die.
it did. I still have a scar from it right here.
You mean Luke has the scar from it?
Oh, yeah, Luke Stanton still has a scar. Yeah, I couldn't keep that ruse. I knew that you were going to ask those questions, but I
Only because, truth is stranger than fiction.
isn't it? Isn't it?
You would not have sat down to write a story. You might have written a story about the spider bite, but to end up where it ended up, that wouldn't have crossed your mind.
Yeah. It's always I don't know. I'm sure for women too. It's so exposing when you're in those odd positions, and then you put yourself in the odd position with all these. Whenever the doctor said to Luke, he called the nurse, the receptionist, and asked her to get the long one. I mean, don't you think the first one was long enough? But he wanted the longer one. I mean, that the blood drains out of your body at that point. I had quite enough of this intrusion. Luke. Yeah. So, things happen, and they're odd, I went through serious trauma the other night. And it was a trigger, one of those trigger things, because I was sprayed twice in the face by a skunk. It's a whole nother story. Probably next week we'll have the skunk story.
Oh, we can discuss skunks. That's always a fun one. Katunkwit it's up and down depending on the skunk population, but at times Katunkwit seems to be covered in skunks.
Yes, I think the coyotes are very effective skunk.
And then there was I think there was a thing of rabies. There are different things that take down the population.
Something tells me we discussed this briefly before in a different story, right? There was a story about skunk-related matters. So true. And but the skunks sprayed me twice in the face, and then we had visitors over the week, and they let the dog out in the nighttime in the backyard, and then it was sprayed in the face. Of course, the dog's suffering, but not nearly as much as me. Because that smell now it's a massive trigger for me to go into this. I went kind of nuts, I have to say. I was in a panic, because I didn't want to clean it up. Fortunately, the person helped me. And, but, they didn't know where anything was, and the dogs, trying to get into the house. It's a mess. It just made life miserable for a few hours, and then, my visitors thought I was crazy. And they probably left with this bad impression of me.
And a lingering smell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rough. Skunk stuff. So the story, there's nothing more to that story than it's not going to change your life, that story.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to be added to that story. It's all out there.
It's all out there. Yeah, there's nothing.
You didn't hold any information back from what I can tell.
Right from the swabbing of the Vaseline to the long one. Ooh, rough. So I don't know, maybe some other men might find that to be acceptable experience, but for me, and I was willing, because I was compromised by this.
This is why they knock you out for colonoscopies.
True, and I think even sigmoidoscopies should have some sort of level of, at least Xanax or something. Oh boy. So let's see. How are we doing for time?
Yeah, we've been at it for over an hour.
Okay. Well, I think we should have a wave. it was really nice visiting with Jane Royce today. That was a wonderful experience. I thought there was a lot of good discussion. Wonderful person, somebody that has a good handle on the fabric of this community. He was a great choice on your part.
Yeah, and it's very funny that you mentioned this just now because the noises in the background are Jane's husband, Mark.
It's Mark. Oh, my goodness. Well, well, we could do without the noises, Mark, because we're in a podcast. So we are going to wrap it up for today, I believe. And is there anything outrageous you'd like to tell me that is very revealing? Because I let it go today.
No, I'd really have to ponder to come up with anything close to that story.
However, the experiences that women have to go through, I'm sure, with gynecological examination is equally disgusting. I'm sure of that. But I'm not going to go into that tonight. We're going to say goodbye.
All right. It's been great hanging out with you again, James.
It has been. Let's lock this place up and get out of here before Mark knocks down the... Looks like he's building something in the other room. All right. Take care. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Turn the lights out. We never remember to turn the lights out. Okay.